Barber. I was named after my grandmother, Grace, and Joy was my mother's part in that, of the naming of me. And I grew up in Franklin Square, Long Island. I was born in Jamaica, Long Island, and my father had immigrated to this country when he was 19, in 1919, and married my mother much later. And I was born in Jamaica, brought up in Franklin Square. I went to the Franklin Square schools.
You were named after your mother's mother?
My father's mother. Yes, that's an Italian tradition. And my grandmother had 9 children in Italy, and all of the female grandchildren were named Grace. That was an Italian tradition. That's what they did. But fortunately, I was the only one born in the United States, so that there was no confusion in the family.
You told us, but what was the J for?
Joy. My mother wanted to name me Joy. That was her first preference. So that's how I got the middle name.
So that was your nickname then, too. It was your actual name, but you were probably known by Joy.
No, I was, everyone called me Grace Joy in my family. And at school, I think they just called me Grace. Most people just called me Grace.
Now, what's your present family situation?
I was married for 41 years. I have 3 grown daughters, and I have 1 lovely grandchild, Gabriella Grace.
How about give us your children's names?
Okay.
Tell us a little something about each one.
All right. My oldest daughter is Allison Barber, and she is a lovely young woman who is also a teacher in Brentwood. She has been for many years an ESL teacher at the Freshman Center, and is enjoying her profession at this time in Brentwood. And my middle daughter, Jennifer Cavallaro, is a dental technician. And she is married to Tom Cavallaro. They have a beautiful little girl. She's now 3, Gabriella Grace. And she is, of course, the center of everybody's attention, needless to say. And my youngest daughter, Kathleen, is married. Kathleen is married to Mark McConte. She has just gotten a job in Brentwood as a social studies teacher at the South Middle School. I think it's South Middle. I'm not sure. But she has just received that position.
Were you you had siblings, you mentioned?
No, I didn't, but I do.
Only child?
No, I have an older brother, my brother Fred. We both grew up in Franklin Square. We were very close to this day, and my brother lives in Farmingville and his family. So we're very kind of a close family, and we are close almost all the time for holidays and otherwise.
Now, it would seem that there are beginning to be a lot of teachers in the family. Is there some other quality or some vocation or interest that has your family stamp on it? Is there something you can say you identify with the family?
I am, in my family, I was the only teacher in my family. However, my husband's family, coming from upstate New York, they are, I shouldn't say were, they are, many of them are in education. My husband, his 2 brothers, his one brother was a superintendent of schools in Northville, New York, and his middle brother he isn't now, he's retired, but he was a teacher, a high school teacher, math, and one of his sisters. So they really had the education market taken over. My children were surrounded by educators most of their lives. Yes.
And your little granddaughter, how old is she?
She is 3. She She is going to be 3 on
What
Saturday.
Can you tell me about her personality?
Oh, well, she is a very lively 3-year-old. And she, of course, is bright because I'm her grandmother. And she's extremely bright. And people always say it's because we spend so much time with her. And we do spend a lot of time with her, but she is just naturally bright. And she is a card. She has a great personality and is very active.
Talk about your husband a little bit, Grace. Tell us what kind of a guy was he? Where did you meet? How did you meet?
Well,
when did you get married? Give us.
We met at the State University at Oneonta, and he was 2 years older than I was. So I met him when I was a sophomore at the State University, and I immediately fell head over heels in love with him, but he didn't realize that, of course. And we eventually dated because I pursued the man, the poor man. But anyway, we dated and we fell in love, and we were married in 1961. And he taught in Oneonta for 1 year because I was finishing my senior year at Oneonta. We were married when I was a junior, and that was a really fine time in our lives. And we lived in Oneonta until I graduated. And he got his master's at Oneonta.
What was your husband's name?
His name was Barber. We both returned to the island to teach, and we both taught in the R.O.B.S School District, where he became a basketball coach and involved. Now you have to remember, in 61, well, I started in 62, but he started in 1960 teaching. There was no union at that time, so we were pre-Schenker days, and so he was involved with organizing in the R.O.B.S School District, and he was also a basketball coach at that time. And I taught 1st and 2nd grade in R.O.B.S, and he taught 5th and 6th grade, I believe. And we lived in Hauppauge. We bought a home in Hauppauge, and we lived there very happily. And we had our 2nd child there. And he, at one point, coached basketball, football, and I guess it's the field hockey. I can't remember. He was busy year round. He had all of the sports, yeah. And then he got his administrative degree. And we moved to New Jersey because he was appointed principal at a school in Wrightstown, New Jersey, which was at McGuire Air Force Base. And so he became an administrator of a primary school in Wrightstown, which actually was on the air base. And we were there for about a year and a half. And then we decided to come back to the island, and he was appointed a principal in the Sachem School District, where he stayed until his retirement in 1995.
What are some of the earliest memories that you had growing up?
I had a wonderful childhood. My mother's family was very close. We had a lot of family parties and a lot of dinners and food and great homemade pastas. And that was like a really happy time in my life. I always felt like I was a very good student. My parents thought that it was an important thing for me to do. And I did very well. I enjoyed school very much. I went to the Washington Street School in Franklin Square, and then I went on to Sewanaka High School in Floral Park, because at that time it encompassed 5 towns, and it was a glorious place to be. I had a wonderful time. I was in a lot of activities, and I was a cheerleader, and I belonged to the Future Teachers of America, and I was very active in high school. I had a lot of fun. We had a wonderful high school. It was big and very well populated, and they had the upstairs and the downstairs. And
So you went all 4 years to Sewanee.
yes, I did.
Before we get into other educational memories, tell me some of the earliest memories, childhood memories of your mother.
My mother was big and very loving. She was a very touchy-feely person. She sang and she held us, and we always were very secure children. We always knew that we were loved and cared for. She was that kind of a person.
What gave her pleasure?
Cooking. She loved to cook for everyone and take care. She was always taking care of her mother, her father, my father, and her children. She still is a very loving person. She is now 89. She's going to be 90 this year. So.
Do you know anything about your mother's family history or your father's family history?
Well, I do. My mother's family came from a part of Italy called Marchi. They're known as Marchigian. They were very, very poor. They were, from what I understand, really poor people. No, it's east of Rome. It's very close to the Adriatic, but it's still in the mountains. They were from the mountains. They were very poor. They were uneducated people. And I believe that's why my grandfather and his 4 brothers came to this country, because there was very little for them at that time. And I believe he probably came here in the early part of the 1900s. Right, 20th century. And he and his 4 brothers came here, and they settled in a part of Pennsylvania where I have many relatives still until today, and that would be Bristol, Pennsylvania. And they're of the 4 families, of course, they had many children. My mother had 6 brothers and 1 sister, and of course, all the 4 families had children and grandchildren, and now great grandchildren. So
was your father one of many also?
My father was also one of many. My father also came from a town near the Adriatic on the east coast of Italy. He, however, was the only one in his family who left. My understanding is he left when he was 19, right after the First World War. He had a fiancée who died of influenza in 1918. And my understanding is he was devastated and decided to come to the United States. And he did. And he really traveled the country quite a bit when he got here. And he attended night school. He became a citizen. He read and wrote the English language very, very well and spoke it very well. And he married my mother. He was 35 when he married my mother.
Met here?
They met here. My mother was born here, but he was 15 years older than my mother. However, she was also in love with him, and that's how they got
What was his occupation?
Well, when I was very young, he did anything he could. My understanding is that during the Depression, he worked on the road where they built Jones Beach. He and very many immigrants worked on that roadway. And that was his job. He didn't bring home very much money. I believe my mother worked in a laundry. They lived in Jamaica. He later became a contractor with 3 other men that he knew, friends. They were not family, but they were friends. And he did a lot of building as the island started to progress. You know, as more people came to Long Island, he was a contractor out here. And so that was really his job until he retired.
Let me ask you how, because siblings, growing up in the same family, the same influences, you would think kids would all be the same, but obviously they're not. How did you and your brother differ?
Well, my brother, My brother was a good student, although he didn't really care that much for school, but he was a good student. And he went on to Adelphi University, and then he went into the service. He became involved with electronics at an early time. And he, at one point, had his own electronics company, very early 60s. And that, I guess the electronic industry, something happened, and he went on to sell. That was he went on to sell electronics. So we differed in that respect. He was very interested in music and boxing and things of that sort. He was in the.
What were you interested
I did a lot of reading. I did that, probably more social, and I did more reading and that kind of thing. I always knew that I wanted to be a teacher from the time I was a very young girl. Very young girl.
Were there any adult influences other than immediate family in your early life? Any grown-ups that had a profound influence on you?
Yes. Other than my teachers, who I always felt very, I had some wonderful, wonderful teachers when I was young. The second grade teacher, whose name was Miss Staley, she was very influential with me. She was just wonderful. I always wanted to be like her.
Must have reinforced your decision.
Yes, because I always felt that way. And she was really, what we would call the old maid school teacher with the little bun in the back of her hair and the shoes that laced up. But she was wonderful, and I loved her. But the other person who really had a great deal to do with influencing me was my Aunt Mary, who was my godmother. She used to talk to me long, long conversations when I was a little girl about growing up and about, she had some schooling, and she always thought it would be good for a woman to be educated. And she also thought that when you find someone that you think might be a good husband, you have to see how he treats his mother, because that will tell you how he will treat you years from now, which I don't know why I remembered it, but I remembered it. And she had a great influence in my life. She was a very patient woman. She had a lot of patience.
What's the toughest decision you've ever had to make?
That's difficult. Well, I guess the toughest decision I ever had to make was when I decided to go back into teaching. And my youngest daughter was a year and 3 months old. And I thought that I would like to go back to teaching, and there was a job available. And I think that probably was a very difficult decision for me to make. My husband was very, very happy about it. He wanted me to do whatever I wanted to do. He always encouraged me. And actually, he thought I should go back to work. He thought it would be a very good idea. And I did do that. And that was when I came back to Brentwood, when I first started Brentwood in 1973.
You may already have answered this question, but could you name or tell us who the best teacher you ever had was?
Well, I had many. But I remember a woman in Salonica High School. Her name was Mrs. Berglund. I don't remember her first name. Her last name was Berglund, and she taught social studies. And she was fabulous. She brought it to life for many people. And I think I was in high school before I truly understood the workings of the government. She was fabulous, and she made you understand the U.S. government and how to become politically involved. And she was fabulous.
Do you remember a game that you played before you were 10?
I don't know. I do remember games, but I don't remember the names of them.
Board game, a street game?
Board games I played with my brother. We had Monopoly, and we had another game which had to do with horse racing. It was in the 40s. I don't know. He had little horses and something like that. I played, yes, with the guy, and he played that. I learned games with him, really.
Okay. I want to ask you if you remember at any time in your young life when you gave a memorable gift to someone. You either bought or made or presented a gift to somebody that you cared about, to a loved one.
When I was very young, I really don't. I remember buying little gifts for my mother, but maybe not very insignificant. But we used to like to go shopping a lot, and she would let us shop alone when we were like 10 or 11 in Hempstead at A&S. And we were allowed to go off by ourselves. So I would buy her a small candy dish or something of that sort. And my mother always treasured everything that we bought for her.
That was before the Roosevelt Mall.
Oh, yeah.
Hempstead was the shopping mecca.
Yes, it was. Absolutely, it was.
What was your first paying job?
Paying? Well, I worked summers in Klein's. I know there was it was Klein's department store in it was on Hempstead Turnpike, and I worked in there as a cashier during the summer. That was my first paying job. Yes.
How old were you then?
Oh, I think I was
16, 17.
I think I was 18. I think it was right before I went to college.
Okay. What was the most important family holiday that all of you celebrated together?
That would be Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. Christmas Eve was always very big. It still is. We always have the traditional fish dishes and a lot of homemade food. And my daughters are very good cooks, thank God. And, and they make the same traditional dishes that we made many years ago in my grandmother's kitchen, because everything was made at my grandmother's house and her kitchen. And then, of course, my mother. But now my daughters make the food, and it's very good.
You're very fortunate, and people who have traditions like that are very fortunate to have them, because there are so many who don't have similar traditions. What were your favorite subjects in school?
Oh, I think social studies. Science was not my favorite. I had trouble with science, but I enjoyed every subject. I would think I did. English and writing. I read a lot. I did a lot of writing.
Did you have a least favorite subject?
Yes, that was science. Yeah. Science was my least favorite subject.
What's your favorite season of the year?
I think fall is my favorite season. I love fall because the weather is so wonderful, and you're not really hot and you're not really cold yet. It's really good walking weather, and it's a good time to travel a little bit also, I think.
I'm wondering, you mentioned, we were talking a little bit about games. Was there something you played with as a child? Do you remember any of your toys or a particular gift of a toy that you received?
Well, yes. I had a lot of dolls. And the reason I did was because my mother came from a poor family. Her mother had many children. And apparently my mother didn't have very many dolls because I had a lot of dolls. I'm sure I asked for some, but I got many more than I ever deserved to have. And she also bought me Madame Alexandria dolls in the 40s, which had to be very expensive in the 40s. So I have those dolls, and I probably will pass them on to my grandchildren, because those dolls are probably valuable, but they're more valuable to me because my mother bought them for me. And she bought them in a store in Philadelphia called Strawbridge's, I believe, in the 40s, because her family was from Pennsylvania, so she shopped there a lot.
speaking of family, was there an aroma that you can conjure up that signifies family to you when you smell it?
I guess it's the pasta gravy with the meatballs every Sunday. That would be, a home, really the home aroma that you would that you would smell.
You mentioned the schools. I think you told us where you went in Franklin Square, and then you went to Sawanka.
Yeah.
What were the schools you attended after that?
Well, I attended the State University of Oneonta, and I graduated in the 4 years. And after that, I taught at Elwood. I didn't go back to school for quite a long while. And after I started teaching in Brentwood, I went back to school. I went to CW Post, and I got my master's degree. And I believe that was the only other school I attended. Yeah.
Grace, try this one. What was the happiest day of your life?
The happiest day of my life. Oh, probably the happiest day of my life was probably the day I got married. That was the happiest day. Yes, definitely.
And then I can anticipate the answer to the next question. The worst day of your life.
Yes, the worst day of my life was the night my husband died.
Yeah, when did that happen?
That was April 8th, 2002, after a long illness, and he passed away at home, and that was sad. Tough, very tough. It's a tough day. Yeah.
Back to an earlier and a happier time. Tell us again what year you arrived in Brentwood.
I arrived in Brentwood September of 1973. There was an opening for a leave replacement, and I also happened to have a wonderful babysitter who was able to take care of my youngest daughter. The other girls were in school, and it was a great thing for me to get out there and get back into it. And Guy DiPietro told me when he hired me, well, actually, he told me that I would have to be interviewed by Pete Demento first. And if, in fact, I was hired, it would be for 1 year. And because that's all that they could possibly do. That was 73. There, not very many people were being hired at that time. In elementary school, the enrollment was declining. Yeah, and so Mr. Demento kindly interviewed me, and I taught second grade with Joyce Rosenberg and some other wonderful people in South Elementary.
Really?
Yes, I taught there for 1 year because at the end of that year they closed the building. Yes. Mm. And
now, do you remember the reason why they closed the school?
Well, I believe at the time they were going to make it an alternate high school, alternative high school. I believe that's what it was. And so everyone got to pick 3 schools that they would like to go to if there was a job available. And of course, I didn't get to pick anything. But I did, however, go to Northwest with Mr. Lotito. They called me. It would have been the weekend before Labor Day. And Mr. Lotito said, you come right down here. And I said, where is it? I have any idea where it is. And so I went to Northwest and I taught 5th grade. And that was wonderful. I loved it. I worked with wonderful people.
Who'd you work with?
I worked with Clara Canavo, Lila Cantor, so many people. Larry Berman. I can't think of Frank. I want to think of his last name and I can't. Frank Scavone. I worked with those. They were wonderful. We had Christy Gidaldi was in that building. We just had a wonderful faculty. People really wonderful. We had great fun, and people always raising the bar. Somebody doing something special. It was fabulous. And while I was there, I do want to mention this because this is important. While I was there, the portables in the back burned down, and I was in one of the portables with my 5th grade, and Larry Berman was in the other. So when I arrived one morning, they said, "Oh gosh, you have no classroom." Because it burned down last night. What do we do? Well, Mr. Lotito put me in I believe it was the bilingual center room. He moved them. He put me in there with my 5th grade. And he said to me, Grace, he said, you can tell a good teacher if she can have a blackboard and chalk, because I didn't have a book. I didn't have anything. So I said, you got it. But, and so I thought, well, I guess I'm really going to have to wing it for a while. And, I have to tell you, people stopped at my door with posters and books, and that was fabulous. The men and the women, they brought in paper, they brought in, like little things you decorate the room with. And I soon had that room fine. But that first day, they made me feel so good because I was, no classroom. So that was fabulous.
Why had you come to Brentwood?
Well, actually, I lived in Hauppauge, so I was very close. And I was talking about maybe finding a job. And because we knew some people that, they were looking out for me, I guess. And so, and I must tell you that I also went to college with Guy DiPietro and Roseanne.
Oh, wonderful.
So while we were at school, Guy and Roseanne, I knew Roseanne.
And where did you go to school with them?
Oneonta State University. Yes.
Okay, that's weird. Yeah.
So we knew them from college. Now, I don't remember saying, Guy, I need a job, but I think that people were talking, and maybe they said, something would come up, and if something comes up, please call her. And I think that's, how.
Had you looked for work anyplace else before?
What
opportunity came up?
Actually, I was working in Hauppauge as a sub at the time. I hadn't put an application anywhere, but the job came up. I think it was late in the summer.
Okay. Do you remember the interview? Did you have an interview?
Yes, I did.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
Oh yes, I had it.
Do you remember any of the questions that were asked?
From Pete Demento? Yes, I do. And I guess that's good that I remember my interview with him. He told me that he had called the Elwood School District to find out, because of the references I put down, and that my principal had gone to South America to retire. And so there was no one at the building that remembered me. However, he did speak to the custodian, whose name he told me, who is John, and I don't really remember the name at the time. And he said, I did speak to John, and he said that you were the most fabulous teacher in this building. He said, so I'm going with John. And I said, you've got to be kidding me. And he said, no. I said, well, I am pretty good. But anyway, he was wonderful to interview me. I remember that.
Okay.
And also Mr. Demento wanted to know what my living room looked like.
Really?
Yes. And so I thought that was odd, but I described it to him. I had my living room really was a mess at the time. I had 3 little kids. But anyway, I told him what it looked like, and he hired me. He was a lovely man.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what were your first impressions of the district then? When you've kind of given me a glimpse of how you felt, but tell me, what were your first impressions when you got started?
When I got started, I'll tell you one. There were two things. Now you have to remember, I taught in the '60s, where we wore dresses and skirts and high heels, and we went to school that way. In the '70s, when I arrived in Brentwood, I realized that the women were wearing pantsuits and pants, and I thought that was very liberating for us. That was different, and also the fact that there were teacher aides, which I thought was very helpful at lunchtime, because when I first started teaching, we would sit with the children at lunch. I'm sure everybody at that time did. And when I first went to South Elementary School, the TA sat with the children at lunchtime, and I thought, wow, we've come a long way. That was fabulous. And we didn't always have a prep period every day, but that came. And that my impression of Brentwood also, I always knew that there were many, it was multicultural. I always knew that. And I had a great appreciation for the kids. They were always fabulous.
Was there something about that period in your professional life that you really enjoyed more than other aspects of it?
Well, I have to say the people I worked with were very, very wonderful people and very caring. And also the children were fun. The children were fun. I really liked the kids.
Did you always teach the same grades? You mentioned several switches. You started out in a lower grade and then you were doing fifth.
Well, you know, when I came in for about, I would say approximately 10 years, I taught different grade levels because it was, I was on the bottom of the seniority list.
Yeah, sure.
So you had to fit in wherever there was a position. So I believe I taught every grade except sixth in those 10 years. And because I also went to a lot of different schools. I went from South to Northwest, and then Northwest closed. And then they gave me an interview with Mr. Carson at Village. So I went to Village, and he said to me, "Tell me where you've been in the district." And I said, "No." And he said, "Why not?" And I said, "Because every building I've been in has closed." And he said, "Oh, no, that's okay. They're never going to close Village." So I told him I had been at South and Northwest, and I stayed at Village for 2 full years. I believe it was 2 full years. And one morning I walked in and he said, you did it. And I said, "What?" He said, "Don't come in today. Everybody's yelling and screaming. They're going to close Village." And I felt so badly. But anyway, we got through that kind of. And I believe we went to Northeast, and I went to Northeast with Joe Carson. I believe it was Northeast. And I was there.
Okay. Were there any other assignments or activities or programs that you were involved with that you want to talk a little bit about?
Well, I taught in the elementary school. I taught the grades 1 through 5. I never taught 6. And then I went to Pine Park. I went to Pine Park and I was teaching first grade, and I absolutely loved it there. It was wonderful. And Mrs. Tijoldi was leaving to become an assistant principal. And she approached me and asked me if I would be interested in taking up the ESL position, because I kind of skipped over it. When I was at Northwest, they needed someone in the bilingual center, and because I had had many years of Spanish, they put me in the bilingual center, and that's when I started going back to CW Post, because I did not have a very clear understanding of really what ESL was. I mean, I knew that they had to speak English and learn English, but I really didn't know the strategies for it. So I went back to school at the time that I was at Northwest. And then over the years, I continued because a certification came out in ESL. So anyway, when Mrs. Tijoldi was leaving, She asked if I would take her position she asked if I would be interested in taking her position in the ESL department. And I thought about it, and Mrs. Brosh knew me because I had worked with her previously, at Northwest. So I believe Les Black was principal at Pine Park, and he said, we know you. It would be very nice if you did this. And I took the ESL position at that time.
Okay. Was your college preparation for teaching, training, did it prepare you for what you had to do when you came to Brentwood?
I believe so. I always felt very secure with my preparation to teach.
Now, while you've always had a job description, you also had your own purpose for coming in every day. And I wonder if you've ever tried to articulate, or would you care to articulate, what was your purpose, Grace, in coming in to face those kids every day? What did you hope to accomplish?
Well, I always took my job I always felt that I had those children for 6 to 7 hours a day. I was in place of the parent, whatever grade I was teaching. And I always reminded the parents about that whenever I could meet with them. So I always felt the full responsibility to those children, whatever the preparation was for the year, whatever the curriculum was. I always felt that they deserved the best of me. And I don't know if it happened to other people, but when I got into work, I concentrated so hard on what I was doing and the children and what was going to happen and how we were going to be prepared. I forgot everything else until I got back into my car to go home. So I wasn't thinking about my teenagers or college tuition, or I just didn't think about those things. I just thought about the children. And maybe that was really good for me. I don't know. But I always had a lot of fun. I enjoyed my job until the day I left.
Do you have any contact with some of those former students of yours? Do you ever
Well, as a matter of fact, very few former students, because you have to remember, I did elementary,
That's
although right. I had a first grader. His name is Kenneth Carrion. Now, of course, he's a man. And he came to my husband's wake. And his mother and father also. So that was really very touching. But Brentwood people they're like that.
What about any contact that you may have kept or had with your former teachers? Is there anyone in your life that taught you at any time?
No, I not that I've kept in contact with anyone. I did recently go to a small reunion that H. Frank Carey had. I didn't graduate from that high school, but many people, we were split up during high school, and there were teachers there that I saw that I remembered from high school. It was interesting.
Are you still in touch with some of the people you worked with?
Yes, I do. I am in touch with Barbara Sweeney and Tish Boyset, and I had a wonderful teaching assistant. Her name was Myrnia Rodriguez. She lives in Florida now, but we do speak on the phone. And there are a host of other people that I see when I go to parties.
Now, what about your affiliation with BTA? You were a BTA member.
Yes, I was always a member, and I was also a delegate when I was in Pine Park. When I became more secure in my position, I became a delegate and went for years to meetings, and I was on the SIT team also in Pine Park. We started it. Yeah, the school improvement team. And
okay. Mm-hmm. Was there ever a time that the BTA or the organization became helpful to you or to your family? Do you ever need to ask for help?
Yes, they were. I always felt the union was more than fair with me when I was in that area, that time when I was low man on the totem pole on the seniority list. I always felt that anytime you called them, they would say, look, you are on our list. Don't worry. We will call you. We will tell you everything that's happening. Those were in the days when people really worried about, am I coming back after 6 years or 7 years or, at that point. And I always felt that they were more than helpful to me. And when I retired also, I felt that they were helpful because I tried to get back into tier 1, and they kind of were helpful in that respect, telling me how to go about it and who to call, and that was helpful.
We've always said that being a teacher, you need to keep your sense of humor. Who is the funniest character that you've ever met in your professional life? Funniest person on the job?
Oh, person?
Yeah. Anybody come to mind?
Oh, a lot of people come to mind. I don't know if we should go there, but well, we had wonderful people at Northwest. We were young too, so it made a big difference. But a young man, Arthur Goldstein, worked with us, and he was fabulous and had a great sense of humor and had us hysterical all the time. He played the piano for the children. He passed away, but he was a wonderful, funny person.
Grace, what was the date of your retirement? When did you decide that it was time?
That
might be 2 questions. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I was in the parking lot talking to a friend who worked next door. She was Mary Mento. She worked at Twin Pines. And she said to me, she was dealing with elderly parents. And she said to me, how many good years do we have left? She said, really, I am starting to think about retirement. And I walked into Pine Park and I thought, she's right. How many good years do we have left? And I decided that day to let them know the year in advance that I was going to retire.
Wow.
So I retired in 98. Yeah, I retired in 98. My husband had been retired for 2 years. And I retired, and unfortunately, fortunately, when I retired, the best thing that Brentwood ever did was have that retirement seminar where you went from person to person. And I understand it was Mrs. Christione that did that. And I have to say, that was so classy and so great that I mentioned it to many people in Sachem because I told them how we retired. And they thought that was great because Sachem really, at that time, did not have anything like that. And then I retired.
And you retired, so in 98?
98.
What have you been doing since?
Well, unfortunately, right after my retirement, my husband became very seriously ill.
What was he ill?
He had throat cancer. And so it wasn't even 4 months, I think, that I retired, that we had a nice summer at the shore, and then we came back, and he was doctoring then. He went into Sloan Kettering, it was operation and treatment and so on. So, and that really took up the next 4 years because it became a full-time thing to do,
And then the grieving takes time.
Yeah, the grieving is not easy. That takes time, takes its toll.
Looking back again at your own professional life, was there an accomplishment that you were most proud of?
I always felt that I gave it my best shot. So I was always pretty pleased with myself, even though sometimes the test scores weren't always that great, but I always felt my kids did the best they possibly could. But I will tell you that with the latter part of the job, when I worked with the ESL children, I always felt that kindergarten showed the most progress over a year. The children were very, very nice to work with, and they were. It was nice to see how far they come from September till June. They made a lot of progress, and that was always very fulfilling to see that. Yeah, that was interesting.
And your last assignment was in Northeast, did you say? Is that?
No, my last assignment was Pine Park.
Oh, Pine Park.
Yeah.
Okay. What was the total number of years that you
Well,
in public education?
30 years and 5 months, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, 30 years.
Do you remember what you were paid your first year?
Yeah. I was paid $5,100. And I thought it was fabulous to get paid for doing what I love to do.
And then they took taxes out.
Yes, they did, right. They took taxes out.
Oh, dear. Well, I think that there will be a lot of things that you will point to and say, I really miss this, I miss that, but I don't miss this. What would you say about the things that you miss?
I miss the interaction with the children, but I really have to tell you, I miss the people.
Yeah.
The people are so fabulous that work in Brentwood. I mean, just everyone in the building. I never really, I really always felt very happy to be lucky to be working with the people I worked with. They were wonderful.
And then there were those things that we don't miss and that you would never miss. You were glad that you didn't have to.
Well, that's true. I really didn't like getting up early in the morning. I did it for 30 years, but I really didn't like it.
You consider yourself a morning person, by the way, or are you a night person?
I'm really a night person, I think. I'm much better at night than in the morning.
But isn't it wonderful to be able to turn the alarm off or not even have an alarm?
Yes. Yeah. That I have to tell you, that is like really good for me.
Was there anything, Grace, that you would like to have finished or like to have accomplished that you didn't get a chance to finish or couldn't do?
Not really. I don't think so.
Okay.
No, I always wanted to be able to track those ESL kids a little bit more, a little longer, but we really never got around to doing that too much. No, I think I was very happy until the day I really left teaching, and I was very satisfied with what I had done.
If you had a magic wand and could wave it and get 3 changes made for the kids and for the district, 3 changes in the way we taught or teach kids, what would you make happen?
Oh, our kids are special kids in Brentwood. I would try to get Newsday out of the way first. And then we always got a lot of state money, and maybe a little bit more would be helpful. And I found that in the later years, the parents became much more interested, had a lot more activity than they did in the early years. So I think that everybody was getting on the right track when I left. Our kids always need a little more sensitivity and a little more help. And
a little more sensitivity from whom, would you say?
Well, from everybody at in the building. And you know what? They really do get it. I find that I always found that they did. And hopefully with the younger people, I think that it's taking place.
Is there that's a good point. Is there any advice that if you had a chance to advise young teachers or people coming in, filling your place in mine, that you could give them based on your own experience? What would you advise young teachers today?
Well, I would advise them to care about the children more than they care about showing people what they can do in the classroom. And I also think that it's very important, I don't know if I'm going to get in trouble, but I also think it's very important for young people to know how important the unions are, because they experience a very nice, comfortable lifestyle in teaching today that maybe all of us didn't have in the very beginning. And I think it's very important to tell them to be careful and keep it that way. So I think that they all have to be very strongly involved with the union, because I believe that that is the backbone of teaching.
Vigilant, yeah.
Yes.
If you could do it all over again, start teaching all over again, you had your youth and vitality, you do it again, would you do anything different?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I think I would do it just the way I did it.
A lot of history has occurred in the last 30 years. What historical event occurred while you were teaching? And how did it affect you?
Well, I guess the big thing was the Kennedy assassination. That was devastating because I was very young when that happened. And of course, it was a terrible time for the whole country, but especially for young people. And we tried to, keep the children very calm. Everybody talked about it so the children knew what was happening. But I remember being devastated by that because you didn't think that somebody so young would be hunted down that way. So that would be really a terrible thing.
What was your favorite year?
Oh gosh, my favorite year. I guess in Brentwood. Well, there were a lot of favorite years, but I would have to go back to Northwest and say I really had a lot of fun there. And of course, Pine Park. I had an excellent time at Pine Park. We had a really wonderful.
So there you're talking about a group of years. It was a period of.
Yes, my best year, I guess. I was young and 75 still. So it was a good year.
I know this is a what do they call it on the multiple choice test? The completion test.
Okay.
In a word, Brentwood students are. One word.
Fabulous.
And what about Brentwood's teachers?
Oh, well, professional.
And if I asked you how you would like to be remembered by your former students when they gather at future Brentwood reunions and talk about you, how would you like to be remembered?
I would like to be remembered as a patient teacher because I think I was very patient. Well, all my family, they know how much I love them, and they all know how much I loved Brentwood. And of course, having teachers in the family is a great accomplishment for me, and I'm very thrilled about it. So they know that. I'm sure they do.
And I just, on behalf of Carmilla, myself, and all of us at R.O.B.S, I want to thank you for volunteering and for being with us today.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.